I remember when it came out, I was like, "Ah, I really want to be in that. How do I get in that?" And then they came around. They sort of came around to me, which was fantastic. And it's written by Bruno Heller, who had written HBO's Rome, which I was a fan of. And the writing's just it's so good. And Theo Galavan was a character they created. Um, and yeah, it was a page turner. It was one of those where every time they sent you the script, you were like, "What's happening next?" And that's a very good sign. But then they sort of segued into, like, my character then has quite an interesting kind of trajectory through the series.
Yeah. And the whole concept of the family and the sort of the mafiosa type, in terms of family means all and family means blood, and we sort of see that come out, that it really is all about family name, family honor, preserving sort of family legacy, and everyone that's tied around him in terms of niece or henchmen or hench ladies, it's all really to do about restoring family honor. He's a guy that's devoted his life to his family, dare I say.
Wow, I wish you'd been around to advise me when I was when I was putting this character together. That sounds great. That sounds about right. I hadn't put it together as a kind of mafiosi sort of parallel, but you're right. It very much is that. I mean, that is the genre they're in. They set it up that you think you're in the superhero genre, but you're really in the crime genre, I think. And the landscape that they created for Gotham. We shot it all in New York on location mostly, so that it really is a kind of gritty New York crime thriller, and so that makes sense. It's got that kind of Godfather history to it.
Yeah. And in terms of the series as well, it's a bit darker in complexion. It has its moments of comedy humor, but it really sort of reaches out. It goes away from the whole sort of Marvel and DC universe that we have in terms of today, that is sort of daring on more PG sort of ratings. This is more darker, it's more adulter. It's sort of, it attracts maybe that bit of an older audience because it's a bit more compelling, dare I say. It's not a bad versus evil and sort of they clash at the end and everything sort of comes good at the end. Dare I say, you're
Yeah,
just wondering about in Gotham, is good going to triumph? Because a good lot of times throughout the series we see evil triumph.
yeah, and it feels much more true to life in that sense of. I mean, I think the fact that they were shooting it for Fox, which was, I mean, that was because it's cable. So there's a huge differentiation at that time in America between terrestrial and cable. So on terrestrial, you really had to be careful what you could and couldn't say. And that was most television, that's all the soaps and the TV shows we know and love so well, from Charlie's Angels and all that kind of stuff. But then when cable came along, it's like, well, you kind of get to write your own rules. And HBO and Showtime started in that space. And then when Fox got in, they were like, so it's almost like a competition for who could be the darkest. Um, and like I said, Bruno had written HBO's Rome, and so he was like very in this territory of power, the dynamics of power. And I think that's really what he was interested in exploring. He didn't really want, I mean, the superhero was just to kind of weigh in to talking about, the kind of stuff he was talking about, the gray edges around things and the reality of, like, there is no good and evil in life. It's all much more complicated.
Yeah. And one thing in terms of the series that really saw his true colors, and some of the most gripping scenes I thought in terms of Theo Galavan were with his niece, played by Natalie Lind, in terms of trying to sort of get his own sort of niece in terms of involved and mixed up with it, and the lengths that he would go in terms of trying to her to influence David Mazouz, who plays the young Bruce Wayne, and working that sort of younger sort of angle, just to, dare I say, to get one over in terms of the Waynes and sort of stuff, that he was going to steep down to the bottom of the barrel, dare I say.
Yeah, well, also they set him up at the beginning. It's like he runs for mayor, he becomes mayor of New York, and he's a politician. And I keep thinking about what you were just saying about the Godfather and mafia and stuff, because that's the whole of the Godfather is really about the corruption of American politics, and at that time. And I think there's a lot of that in this, that he's just a smart political operator, and he can see where the future lies, and he can see who the power players are going to be, and he's just doing what he does, which is like accumulate power and solidify his base. That's what they do. That's how they think.
And I suppose, James, in terms of the business, when an arch villain is doing very well, there's always a time, or comes a time or the hour in terms that he might have meets his demise as such. But was it sort of was it a bit of a head scratcher for you, and a bit of a eureka moment when they said, "Oh, we want to bring Theo Galavan back, but this time as a guy called Azrael, in terms of Hugo Strange and all that"? When that conversations or story came about to you, were you trying to think to yourself, how are they going to make this work? How are they going to make the audience and viewers? I'm supposed to be dead here.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's how I mean, I think they do a really good job of that. I mean, the Azrael, if you're a fan of the DC universe, is a character that had its own story series, and so I think they thought it would be kind of fun. They really wanted to, because Theo was an invented character, I think they wanted to really tie it in and go, everything feeds back into the DC landscape, and that what they've done is basically, I think they always knew they were going to do that. And that
Theo Galavan was kind of, that was going to happen?
No. They don't tell us anything, dude. I mean, they send us these scripts, and our names are watermarked on it, so that if we leak it online, they can send a sniper out for us. So it's all, they're very, very concerned about preserving storylines, especially then when it was week by week. So no, I didn't know that, but it was very fun. So I mean, I get. Like a lot of the time, we go on the same journey as the audience goes on. We get the scripts, and we kind of are experiencing what the audience is going to experience. It's very helpful to know what the kind of surprises are,
And when you were in the midst of that sort of heavy sort of shooting, sort of such, and when episodes were sort of being dropped, did you start to get to watch one or two and start to take it in, or did you watch the whole season one before you came on in terms of season two, to get a whole feel of that sort of atmosphere, that whole sort of what were people talking about? Because people were talking about it at the time. It was one of probably the biggest shows in America at the time. So
it was, yeah.
Did you want to did you try and engross yourself in it to get a sort of feel for it before you came?
Well, I watched it all as it came out. I was a fan, and I mean, I should also give props to Danny Cannon, who set the look and the design. So Danny, Bruno's the writer more, and Danny's the visual guy. Danny had made a name for himself because he set up CSI. So all the CSIs, the look and the flavor of CSI, that's all Danny Cannon. He came out of movies. And he really cemented his reputation. So this very dark kind of gothic noirish look that he created is a big part of why it feels so kind of intense and focused and realistic, even though it's sort of got this magical element of the superhero in it.
When you arrived on set, James, was a familiar face waiting for you in terms of Donald Logue? Had you sort of came across it's a small industry, the Irish and sort of English industry, actors cross paths many a time, so there's a warm, friendly face waiting for you in terms of seeing Donald. I imagine it wasn't the first time you came across Donald Logue.
It wasn't the first time we're friends, actually, and so I was thrilled to be working with him again. And yeah, you're right, it doesn't get friendlier than Donald. He's great. He's a great actor, and he's a great guy. So yeah, well spotted. But yeah, it was great to work with him again.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we'd worked together. I think we were introduced. I can't remember, but we just sort of hung out before all of this.
Yeah. And in terms of the hours, because in terms of the scenes and the turnaround in terms of shooting episodes on Gotham as well, there were probably long hours, long days, long sorts of seasons in terms of that. So when you were enroped in Gotham, I suppose it was really a full focus. I imagine you couldn't really concentrate on anything or anything else in terms of looking at possible offers or anything for any other work down the line, because I imagine Gotham took basically how big it was. It took all your energy and all your focus at the time.
Yeah, it's pretty all-consuming. I mean, most shows are, honestly, but we do have time. We have a lot of time on set in between setups to read stuff and think about stuff. But I like the family feel of being on set, and I love hanging out with people on set. So the whole thing is just always. I love everything about this industry, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I suppose, James, before we came on air, you mentioned that there's a good lot of Irish blood running through you. You might enlighten our viewers and listeners where that Irish blood comes from.
Well, both sides. So my mother's side is from Sligo, my father's side is from Roscommon. I had my DNA done recently, and it's 98% Celt. I think it's 75% Irish. Then the rest is Scottish and Welsh, and then 2% Danish, because Frain is originally a Norman surname, and Normans were Vikings who settled in the north of France. So I got this DNA. I was like, they found 2% Viking.
Yeah.
I'm 2% Viking, and then the rest of me is basically Celt and mostly Irish. So yeah, my family come from the north. I think the Frains, Regans, Forsters, Murrays, we pretty much stayed in the north of England,
Yeah,
in the Irish community there. Yeah.
Yeah. Sligo and Roscommon are very close to each other, as you probably
Right
know,
next to each other. I know.
Yeah,
And my mum and dad were born in Leeds, in St. Jimmy's Hospital, in the same ward, in the same week of each other. So if you do the panning shot at the beginning of the movie, they were kind of they couldn't escape each other. I think they went to school together. I mean, it's it's a tight-knit community. But when we moved south, I was like, how come we're the only family with 8 kids, and how come no one else goes to the same church as us? And we started asking all these awkward questions. I'm like, don't ask those questions. Very complicated story. Don't like to talk about it.
8 kids is well gone in Ireland now these days, James. You'd be
I
lucky
know.
if you see a family more than 4 in terms of that. That's
Right.
the way it's changing times. And
Yeah,
James, you've done many projects as well in Ireland as well before we come in here. You mentioned you shot The Tutors in Ireland.
Yeah, for 3 seasons of that. That was all in Dublin, and I think it was we used St. Patrick's Cathedral as the main cathedral scenes, and lots of castles that we got to shoot in, but a lot of it on stage. But yeah, I was basically lived in Dublin for like 3 years.
Yeah. And James, one of the interesting things that I'm seeing an awful lot in the business now, in terms of doing these interviews, in terms of TV series coming up, and there's an awful lot of TV series that might have been very popular in the 90s or 2000s that are being reincarnated in terms of animated sort of series at the moment. In terms of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me. I don't know about this.
So it's the Star Trek Voyager and all that. That's been turned into an animated series called Star Trek Prodigy. Yeah, and Kate Mulgrew and Robert Beltran are back playing voiceover roles of the original characters they sort of played in the past. There's talks as well that Stargate as well with Richard Dean Anderson, and that there's going to be an animated voiceover version of that as well, the very popular sci-fi show from Vancouver and Canada as well. So these sort of reincarnated versions. I'm just wondering if a possibility in terms of the DC sort of universe, in terms of Gotham, in terms of Theo Galavan came around for you, and maybe in the next few years in terms of a voiceover role, in terms of animated series. Would that be something that interests you, or are you much a character that loves being in front of the videos in terms of the cameras, lights, actions, being able to see yourself on screen and be able to act out your moves and stunts, or is voiceover something not for you? Because sometimes it doesn't suit actors.
I like it. I like all of it. I mean, the business is shifting that way because of technology. Anyway, I've done some video game stuff and motion capture, so it's like, I mean, it feels like it's heading more and more in that direction where you've got these little bodysuits and you have to kind of look at green screens and imagine everything. It's kind of like it's become like a cross between theater and film where it feels less and less real when you're on set. You have to use your imagination more, sorry. And So yeah, I mean, it's all the same thing to me. It's all you know,
Okay.
acting, pretending, having fun.
Interesting. James, the final question before I let you leave, and probably the hardest question. I put this to all our guests in terms of our series. So
Uh-oh.
everyone that's appeared in the Gotham series has got this question, and the same question to you to finish up. Let's pretend there was a Gotham encyclopedia, a dictionary as such, and they put the character Theo Galavan into the encyclopedia, the dictionary, and under the synopsis, where it was two sentences to describe him, they left those two sentences blank. Not really an epitaph as such, but a synopsis. And they came asking for your talent agent to get in contact with James Frain, who played the role of Theo Galavan. And they asked you, James, to write those two sentences to describe Theo Galavan for the Gotham Encyclopedia, the dictionary as such. What would you like those two sentences to read?
Well, I think I'd probably say the origin story of Azrael and how that connects into the DC landscape, and also that, you know, the classic charming sociopath.